Welcome back to the Birdhouse Dynasty Show, and tonight we're going to have a little fun. We're going to be talking stacks. That's right, QB wide receiver stacks, and then the top QB tight end stacks. So let's get right into it with our top QB wide receiver stacks. Stacks have always been a fun part of fantasy, and there's a reason for it. I'll get into it a little later. But we're going to start off right with the QB wide receiver stacks. And at the top of the list, we have Dak, Prescott, and CeeDee Lamb. Now, last year, as many of you know, especially those of you who own both of them, how important they were late in the season and maybe had you ride them to a title for yourselves. So the last couple of seasons, Dak and CeeDee have definitely risen, and as CeeDee's gone, so has Dak followed. Last year, CeeDee was the top wide receiver in fantasy. Dak was the third-rated quarterback in most of your scoring leagues, and so I've got them right at the top of the list, basically more so because of the value that it actually costs you to acquire them, rather than actually ranking, because I would have the next guys on the list, that would be Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase, as number one if we were just simply ranking the value in fantasy of them, but the dynasty value, that is, based on age, but because of the actual production and what it actually costs to acquire Dak Prescott, I have Dak and CeeDee on top. Now, Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase, of course, are no schlumps, so that's why they're right up there at number 2. And then at number 3, we have Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. So after those top 3, who I would consider far and away the top 3 high-end stacks in fantasy right now, they cost a lot to acquire. All 6 of those guys usually go in the first and second rounds of your dynasty startup drafts. The last couple I've been in, actually, best ball drafts, Dak has actually gone in the second in both of those and been teamed up with CeeDee, so the owner did acquire that top-end stack. Now, at number 4, I have a stack that's come under fire the last week or so, and that is Pat Mahomes and RRice. Now, we all know the kind of legal trouble RRice is in right now. Maybe we don't know the exact details of the situation, but we do know that he probably will be facing some sort of a suspension from the NFL. Just how long, who knows? Will it be 6 games? Will it be maybe only a couple of games? We don't know yet. I highly doubt it'll be a full season, but that is to be determined. Now, at number 5, I have the exciting new stack of Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman always has been a little underrated as far as I'm concerned, but with Anthony Richardson now in the fold, there's a little more excitement in Indy. And I do see that as a very high-end stack coming with the wheels of Anthony Richardson teaming up with the consistency of Michael Pittman. I think that can be a very, very valuable stack for you in your dynasty leagues. I also gave honorable mention to Tua and his duo of Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, as well as Jared Goff and the one and only Amari St. Brown. Now, if we move over to the bargain stacks, these are stacks you can acquire later on in your startup, maybe rounds 7 through 10 for both players. This one, it can be quite valuable based on the draft position. So at the very top of the bargain stacks, I've got Brock Purdy and Brandon Aiyuk. Now, this one has a little asterisk by it based on Brandon Aiyuk's current contract status, and so we'll have to wait till draft night, actually, probably, to see if he actually gets to stay in San Francisco with Brock Purdy, or if he gets dealt away so he gets a better contract than the one-year deal he's playing on right now. So we'll see with Brandon Aiyuk what happens, and if they'd remain on top as bargain deals for you. Number 2 for the bargain stacks, we've got the brand new duo of Kirk Cousins and Drake London. Now, London's been flying up the boards this offseason ever since Kirk Cousins came to Atlanta, and now he gets to fire away at Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Should be exciting down in Atlanta, and I've got them at number 2. Number 3, I've got also another new tandem, and that would be Will Levis and Calvin Ridley. Now, it's sort of a prediction here because we don't know exactly how these two will play together, especially with Will Levis being a youngster, and we also have a new offense in Tennessee, and that's really what I'm throwing my chips in on this duo. The Cincinnati Bengals offensive coordinator went to Tennessee to take over the helm as the head coach, and so Callahan brings his offense there, meaning that they very, very likely will be throwing it at least 100 more times this season. That will lead to a lot more targets for Ridley and D-Hop, and I see Ridley as the number, I guess, 1A, I would say, in that duo. He's also younger than Hopkins, so that's why I have him as the main stack with Will Levis. Number 4, I've got the stack that lit it up last season down in Tampa. That's Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. Now, this one is a very valuable stack for you based on where you can draft these guys. Baker's going somewhere around quarterback 20 in round 7 or 8 of your startups. Mike Evans can go somewhere around 7, 8, 9, and both of them can be, well, Baker probably would go for a late first, and Evans would probably cost you an early to mid second in your leagues if you're looking to acquire them. I would say go for it if you are, sitting on one of these guys and need a little help at the other position. It definitely wouldn't hurt to kick the tires on the other end of the duo in your league. And at number 5, I've got Matt Stafford and Puka Nacua. Now, this one is at 5 based on the status of Matthew Stafford. He's definitely playing this season, but after this season, who knows? He could end up playing 2, 3, or more seasons, but we always have that possibility of retirement now with Matthew Stafford. I also have a couple of honorable mentions here for the bargain stacks. Definitely Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper can't go without mentioning. The new duo of Bryce Young and Deontay Johnson I see as lighting it up. And don't forget the Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson duo. Aaron Rodgers probably can be had for very cheap in your league. Probably a late second, I would say. And if you've got Garrett Wilson and need a little help at quarterback, maybe Aaron Rodgers is the guy to go after. So now I want to get into why stacks are important. I did a little research in one of my main leagues, Dynasty Land, and it's a 12-team PPR, half first down, tight end premium superflex league, start 9. Now, what I did was I took the margin of victory of every single game in that league. There were actually 91 games during the season and the playoffs last season. And in those games, the average margin of victory, I'll give you a second to venture a guess. The average margin of victory in those outings was 38 points. Wow. All right. We all think that fantasy comes down to nail biters because those are the games we remember, right? But in actuality, fantasy is a game of blowouts. That's right. You need big points, and it's still a week-to-week game, so you need big points individually in a particular week to win your game, right? So it would only make sense that if said wide receiver on your team has a big outing, it's going to be pretty likely that his quarterback has a good game as well, right? So, hence the birth of stacking was born. And it's an age-old tale in fantasy as long you can go back to Montana and to Rice. So what I'm saying is I've always been a proponent of stacking. I love doing it. I love trying to acquire stacks on my teams and my leagues. I know that for a while there were people who were really against stacks. They were always saying, well, if one guy has a bad game, the other's going to have a bad game too, and then I'm probably going to lose my week. Yeah, well, you know what? If your good players have a bad week, you are probably going to lose that week. So if you have a high-end quarterback that has a bad week, that's probably going to cost you your game, regardless of whether the receiver does well or not, right? We're not trying to hit the median in your league. You're trying to get above the median in your league, right? So regardless of whether your league actually plays with the median victory each week, you're still trying to, on an average week, get above what the midline is. And by having 2 out of your, say, 9, 10, or 11 starters hit in 1 week, it only brings you closer to victory. If you're starting 10 and 2 of your guys hit, really all you're needing is 1 receiver to hit because the quarterback follows. If they hit, well, then you're only needing, in a start 10 league, you're only needing the other 8 guys to basically break even, and you will be above the median. All right. So it's all analytical, statistical speaking, but what it comes down to is stacking is valuable. So go out there and do it, guys and gals. Don't be afraid of the stacks. Now, also to mention there, I did have the 38 points per game was the average margin of victory. I also was saying that there was seen here in that league that only 20 games in the whole season were determined by less than 10 points. There were actually 29 games decided by over 50 points. Now, again, this was the 4th year in this league, so there has been sort of a division from top to bottom, sure. So I'm sure the games are a little bit closer in, the first year of your dynasty league. But again, I go back to, if you've already got 2 guys hitting in a week, then it's less guys that you need to hit that week. Okay, and again, I can't emphasize enough, it's still a week-to-week game. Yes, we want the best players over the course of the whole season, sure, but we need them to hit each week. What I'm getting at is, like, go to the running back position, right? Take Devon Achane versus somebody more in the middle, like a James Cook, perhaps, right? Devon Achane can get you more on a weekly, has a higher ceiling on a weekly basis than James Cook does, hence why Devon Achane is valued more in Dynasty. All right, it's not a whole big difference, and I'm sure if you take the season as a whole, James Cook probably outscored Devon Achane last season. I don't have it right in front of me here, but Devon Achane probably won you just as many weeks as James Cook did in his limited action with all the injuries he had. So let's move on to the quarterback tight end stacks. Those can be just as valuable for you as the wide receiver quarterback stacks. So at the top right now, I have Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid. Based on Stephon Diggs heading out of town, I've moved the youngster and the wily veteran Josh Allen up to the top. At number 2, I've got Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. They've been steady performers over the last few seasons. We all remember that 1 week a couple of years ago where Lamar and Andrews both scored over 60 points on a Monday night game, easily winning any of their stack owners their week. At number 3, I've got Jared Goff and Sam LaPorta. Number 4, Pat Mahomes and the old vet Travis Kelce. And at number 5, Kyler Murray and Trey McBride. Now you can see here, this list contains basically the top 5 tight ends in the league. So when any of them have a big week, you can bet yourself that their quarterbacks will follow with a big week. All of these tight ends are generally going except for maybe Andrews. They're generally going anywhere between rounds 3 and 5. Actually, I'd put Kelce in that later range now. Andrews and Kelce have slid down the boards at tight end because of their age. They're probably going around 6 or 7 now in startups. But to acquire them, all of these guys will probably still cost you a first. Kelce, a late first. Andrews, a mid first. Same with Kincaid, LaPorta, and McBride. So that's what you could expect to pay if you want to stack those tight ends up with the existing quarterbacks. Now, if we go over to the bargain stacks at tight end, started off with a new duo of Kirk Cousins and Kyle Pitts. Much like Drake London, Pitts has seen a rejuvenation to his dynasty value with Kirk Cousins coming to town. At number 2, I've got Trevor Lawrence and Evan Engram. Engram posted an amazing, well over 100 catches last season, and I don't see that dropping based on Calvin Ridley leaving town. Even if the Jaguars do draft a receiver this year, and may even in the first round, still see Evan Engram as a super important part of that offense. At number 3, I've got Brock Purdy and George Kittle. Kittle can be had later on in around 7, 8. He slides down. Number 4, I've got Deshaun Watson and David Njoku. Njoku had a very sneaky good season last year. Now, the trick with that one is to watch that Watson actually performs well with him. A lot of those big numbers last year came with Joe Flacco. Now, at number 5, I've got the sneaky duo of Dak Prescott and Jake Ferguson. Ferguson did put up very solid numbers last year, and Dak has always loved his tight end going back to Jason Witten. And as honorable mentions, I've got Will Levis and Chigo Okonkwo, as well as Baker Mayfield and Cade Otton. Otton came on at the end of the last season, in the last couple of weeks of the regular season, as well as both playoff games, to show that he could be a riser this year in Dynasty at tight end. So that's about all I've got for you guys today. Again, I want to remind you, stack them up, get those victories. Check me out on X at clemke007_FF, and you all have a great evening.